Welcome back to another episode. My guest today is Miguel Pobre, and he's the co-founder of Fluid Roots. Miguel and I met each other at the University of Oregon in the School of Journalism and Communications. We knew of each other, but due to time constraints and people always on the go, we never really had a conversation. And it wasn't until I became a member of the Cultura Filipinas Club where that changed, and Miguel and I got to talk, and our friendship started taking form, and it has just blossomed since then. So I'm very grateful to him for sitting down and talking with me and telling me about his life growing up in Seattle and how he ended up at the University of Oregon, what he's done since, and what he's looking to do now. And I'm very. It was a great interview. I'm very happy with how it turned out, and I'm very excited for everyone else to watch it or listen to it. And listening to it, you can do now because as of May 2nd, we're officially on Spotify. So that's some exciting news. I'm very happy about this next step in the content producing, content showing evolution that I'm trying to get into. Uh, so if you look up Keoni Chats in both Spotify and YouTube, I should be one of the top results. Please subscribe, please like, please follow, and I will do my best to get you guys weekly content and find people that I think are interesting and try to get their interviews, posted so people can learn about, you know, this person or learn about what they do. And so, without further ado, please enjoy the interview that you're either watching through YouTube or listening to through Spotify of Miguel Pobre. And we went to school together, and we actually met through the Filipino club, which we'll get to later on. But I know for me, Filipino mother is always overly concerned. So,
Yeah,
how's your family doing, and how are they adjusting to what's going on?
yeah. So I'm here in Oregon, and my family's up in Washington. So the disconnect is definitely something that is kind of tough because, like, of course, I want to go visit home, especially with like everyone being home right now, go see my family and everything. But just with the whole stay-at-home thing, I think it's hard because I'm staying here, and then my dad's actually a nurse, so he's in the front line. So that's always concerning and kind of tough to know that he's kind of surrounded by the whole thing, but I know that he's helping and staying safe and everything. So that's been a thing. And then my mom and my sister's in high school, so she's like doing like online classes, so she's doing like Zoom meetings and everything for her classes too. So um, that's something that's new to her. So I know she's like kind of busy trying to figure all that out while she's has school and everything. And then my mom's just kind of taking care of the family. So it's just tough not being there. And then I know that they wanted to come visit here, but especially with my dad being on the front line, it's better not to go a bunch of places. So
Yeah, and then it's I had some family complications with COVID back in the Philippines, so
mhm.
that was definitely tough to go through that with my mom and my grandma and not be able to hug them. But we're still like we're in the same room, but obviously it's like we had to still keep our distance. So it's been tough.
Mhm.
So thank you to your dad, and hopefully this blows over, and then you guys are able to give each other one big hug.
Yeah, definitely looking forward to it.
Yeah, and so can you, I have an idea of my version of a childhood in a Filipino home, but can you tell me how yours was growing
Yeah.
up? And I know Filipinos also love to party, so can you tell me about some of those?
Oh, absolutely. So just with my family, I guess uh, Filipinos are huge on like, family gatherings and parties, like you mentioned. But I think part of like, the big difference with how I grew up, at least in my very early years, is that in the US, for both sides of my parents, for the most part, they're actually the only ones out of like family brothers and sisters who are actually here in the US. So in terms of like, all those like fun family gatherings with, big parties and stuff, I didn't have as many in like the early years of like me growing up, just because no one else was in like the US.
Hmm.
And then went to the Philippines for the first time, or so the first time I went to the Philippines, I was like 2 years old, so I don't really like remember. But the first actual time was in high school, my junior year of high school. And then that was the first big like time since like the whole family's been like together. So that was really like, a big Filipino party with, everything from, lechon and karaoke and dancing and everything. So that was my first like real experience with like a big like family Filipino party. So that was awesome. That was amazing. But just in terms of like, growing up in a Filipino household, like the neighborhood that I grew up in and like the high school that I went to was like majority white. So I just didn't have as many like Filipino friends and like like I said, no family members like around. So not as much surroundings for like Filipino families in like when I was growing up. But throughout middle school and high school, I made some Filipino friends. And then my grandma, Lola Mama is what we called her. May she rest in peace. She was the only other family that was like really like, she was like 10 minutes away. So we would be seeing her a lot just because she was like always around. But other than that, there wasn't much like Filipino family in terms of my family like around when I was growing up.
How did you get past that feeling of, there's not a lot of people that are same culture as me or same ethnicity as me, since you also mentioned that you were in a primarily white school?
Yeah, so I guess for me, it was, you know how all Filipinos kind of have, their cousin that's not really their cousin.
Yep.
So that was kind of my first, like, he wasn't like family, but like my cousin's family and my family were pretty close. So that was actually the um, connection that I kind of had throughout, like growing up middle school to like into high school. Because his family was like, my cousin. That was, I'd always go over there in the summer. They'd come over to our house. So that was kind of the first kind of connection I had with like, a Filipino family and, my cousin and everything. And then in middle school, I met one of my best friends to this day, Sandy. Her and her family were very welcoming to me and my family. I was like the new kid at school or in middle school. So, I didn't have any friends there. She was one of the first friends that I made. And then, her grandma's lumpia, fire. And then just like, look, I didn't really connect with my Filipino culture until I was hanging out with them more. Because one of the ways she kind of wrote me in actually was she needed a partner for tinikling. Like, and then because I was one of the only other like Filipino kids in the school, she was like, well, let's just ask Miguel. Like, I know he's new, but maybe he can do it. And I was like, I've never done it before, but I guess, we'll practice. And we did it. And then, yeah, that's kind of where it started was middle school with Sandy, tinikling.
Can you explain what tinikling is? Or
Yeah,
try to.
yeah, try to. Basically, tinikling is Filipino dance, traditional dance with two bamboo sticks. And the story is basically, it's about, basically the dance is about two birds going around the bamboo traps, right? I think it's something like that. And then, yeah, I mean, we performed it as, there's so many iterations to it, but in 8th grade, yeah, we performed it as just us two, and then the clappers were her uncle and my dad.
Yeah.
So that was pretty cool. We performed it once for her grandma and grandpa's 50th anniversary, and then we also performed it like at like our middle school's like extravaganza at the end of the year, which was pretty funny. But yeah, that was the beginning of that.
What was it about UO that really caught your attention, and specifically, the journalism school? How'd you end up there?
Yeah, so just when I was applying for colleges and everything, or at least just first doing like the research on like, what is college and everything, I guess one of the things that, I knew of just from, watching college sports and everything. And I was like, Oregon's like this huge school. I know they're, very prominent, legendary school in terms of Nike and just, like its legacy as a school and with sports. And I think sports actually was part of the draw, just being part of like a big sports school. And during the summer of, what is it, sophomore year, I think it is, or junior year, when you're like, researching before you go, me and my best friend, James, we took a trip with my dad down like to Oregon. We went to like UP, we went all the way down to Eugene, toward U of O, and, did like hit the schools going all the way back up. It was like a day trip. It was super fun. And then, yeah, when we got to campus, like at U of O, just like it was, summertime, so sun was shining, we had a tour and everything, but I was like, wow, like this place is beautiful.
Hmm.
Like, like all the buildings were super nice. And I was like, I can see myself here. And I didn't even know anything about it yet. So that was kind of the first initial thing, was when I like first actually like was there. And I know that like a lot of people who are out of state, I'm just lucky because I was so close. I know a lot of people out of state like don't actually get to see the colleges that they go to sometimes, or at least like before they go. So I was lucky to see it in person. Like, I already was like had a feeling. And then yeah, we went back up, we're applying to colleges. And then pretty much every college I applied to was out of state. And everyone's like, oh, why don't you, like, with all the things that I just said about like sports and, prominent school and everything, people always ask me like, why didn't you just apply to UW, because it's right there. And I think for me, I like wanted to be like somewhere else. I've been in Seattle my whole life. I think it was time, like, if I don't leave, for another like 4 years, then, and when I have the opportunity to, I'm just going to be here my whole life, which isn't a bad thing. I love Seattle, but I think like being able to see what else is out there, of course, um, and live in another place, I think that was like very, like, I really wanted to do that. So U of O was just kind of the top school in terms of like giving me an opportunity to do that. So once I got in, I took it right away. That was the one. So
There you go, man. So you said it was a road trip with your dad and your friend, or just you and your dad?
me, my friend James, and my dad.
S- That's a pretty long road trip from Seattle
Yeah,
all the way to Eugene and back up. Like,
yeah. It was basically driving all day and touring for like an hour. So yeah, it was a long day, but it was really fun.
yeah. Do you, being trapped in a car with, those people for endless hours, I imagine can drive someone a little batty, but how do you think that kind of trip, what kind of impact do you think that trip had on your relationship with your dad and your friend James, and, just for you?
Yeah, so if you know me, I actually don't like driving. Not necessarily being in the car, but I just don't like driving myself. So that's why I love Uber, I love Lyft, because I'd rather have someone else drive me.
Yeah.
But I think because that was actually the first time, of course, that I went to Eugene, and that was the longest like road trip I ever had up to that point. So for me, it was more of like, I guess like it was prepping me for like, because basically when I ended up going to U of O, I did that trip a million times. So I think that was the first time I was like, wow, like, this is like a long road trip, like this is what everyone talks about when they're doing road trips, but it was, a few hours. But yeah, I think just because like I had my friend James with me, and my dad's the coolest dad ever. So it wasn't like no one hated each other by the end of the trip or anything. I think we were all just excited because, James and I are in high school, so we're still young. We're just, ready to see, what else is out there. I think, like I said, just with like college research and, what is college, like I really had no idea at that point. So I think we were just more excited rather than like nervous, because I didn't really know, I didn't know what to expect for a college tour. And, like where are we going? Like Eugene, Oregon, I don't even know what that means, like I've seen it on TV. That's really it, So I think it was more excitement. And yeah, I guess the whole actual 5 hours from Seattle to Eugene was kind of prepping me for me driving and doing that so many times. And like I said, I'm not the fondest of driving. So it was definitely, that was the first time I made that trip, and definitely wouldn't have been the last. So
Yeah, I mean, I'm in Portland, and to Eugene, it's only like 2 hours, depending on the traffic and you're driving. I just remember that drive was horrible during the holidays and
oh yeah.
weekends, and everyone trying to get out at the same time. You're like, oh
Yeah.
God, why? Yeah.
I
So
have a
how'd you end
quick
up at
story.
the? Yeah, go
Oh,
ahead.
I have a quick story about a trip like that, actually,
Sure.
just because you mentioned like holidays and stuff. So this is actually my freshman year in at U of O. Um, I like, I didn't, this was the first time I was going home, like, since college, basically, right? Like since I moved in. So I didn't really know like the whole like holiday thing. I didn't know how crazy it would be. I had to, like take some stuff and get ready to go back home. Like, I was going to fly. And then I was trying to get a taxi or, some way to drive to the airport because, it's not like walking distance,
Mhm.
but all the taxis were like busy and full and, they were kicking you out of the dorm. So I was like, damn, I don't have like a way to get to the airport. And basically like I was about to miss my flight. So then, I was calling just friends with cars and asked, whoever I knew, whoever was there, I was like, hey, do you have anyone that can drive me to the airport? I'll pay you. But like no one could do it. And then one of my friends, who's actually from Seattle, he was living in Eugene. And then I called him. I'm like, hey, like, can you drive me to the airport like right now? Like, I'm about to miss my flight. And he's like, perfect timing. I just got out of the gym. Like, I can drive you right now. I was like, perfect. We get to the airport, and Eugene Airport's pretty small, so you can see the plane basically like when you walk in.
Mm-hmm.
So I see my plane, and I'm trying to check in, but then basically the lady was like, "You missed your check-in by like 5 minutes. I'm so sorry. Like we can get you on the next flight." I'm like, the plane is right there. Like, can you please just check me in right now, and I can just literally walk, get my bag checked in, and be on the plane because they haven't taken off yet. And I know they're not because like it wasn't time yet. They closed the gates like 30 minutes before or something like that. So I'm like, I'm right here. And she's like, I'm sorry, we can't do that, blah, blah, blah. And then I think that was like a Friday. And I was like, when's the next flight? I need to, get home ASAP. And then she was like, oh, the next flight's going to be Sunday morning. I'm like, I need to be home like tomorrow.
Ooh.
I was like, I'm not sure. And I was like, okay. I was like, I'll let you know. So I like didn't book the flight and everything. And then my friend was like, like, hey, what are you going to do? And I was like, I don't know. And then my dad, the superhero that he is, he goes, hey, I'm going to drive to Eugene right now and like come pick you up. And mind you, it's like 10 p.m. So like it's dead at night. So my dad's like, like, hey, just stay put, like, hang out with your friend, do whatever you need to do. But like, I'm going to come pick you up like right now. I was like, it's like it's 10 o'clock, it's like dead at night, like, are you sure? I don't want you to be tired. He's like, no, don't worry, I got this. And yeah, my dad, I don't know how he did it, to be honest, but he drove all the way and picked me up in Eugene at like 3 a.m. or whatever it was.
Holy
Hung out
crap.
at my friend's house, and just kind of hung out there because he was upperclassman, so he wasn't in the dorms or anything, so he had his own place. And then yeah, my dad picked me up, and then because I was kind of okay, like I was awake obviously. Like I drove, partway home, so that my dad didn't have to drive the whole way. But basically, he was in the car for like 10 hours because we drove straight back. Like we didn't like stop or anything. So yeah, my dad is a superhero. It was crazy during the holidays. I didn't realize. And yeah, he picked me up like at like 3 a.m. in Eugene from Seattle the same day.
Wow, that's a dad of the year, or dad of everything
Yeah. Oh,
award.
he literally the best. I honestly don't know how he did it.
Whew.
But yeah, but he's a fan of driving. I'm not. So I was like, I mean, if he can do it, he can do it. That I don't know if I could have done that.
You're a driver when you need to be, but if you don't need to be,
Exactly.
passengers can
Yeah.
be.
But yeah, oh my gosh, I don't know how he did it, but that was my first experience with holidays, like, trying to get out of Eugene because yeah, I couldn't get a taxi. It was impossible to get to the airport if you didn't know someone. So
Yeah. So how did you end up in the journalism school, or what
yeah.
made you want to go there?
So initially, I think like a lot of people, I started out as business. So I wasn't like actually looking at the J school when I first applied to U of O at least. I think business was always something that, as general as it is, I was like, I think that's definitely somewhere that I really want to be. But then it was funny, it was in one of those like short little presentations at the beginning of classes when, different schools and clubs kind of go in front of the class, and there was a journalism school on. And, for once I was paying attention. So I was like, that actually seems really interesting. And then, yeah, what do you know? Basically the next term, I switched majors and I became a journalism major because I started, it was mainly because of photography. I started being a photographer in high school. And then when I heard that J school presentation, I saw it as a chance to be like a professional photographer, or at least, be paid for my work. So I was like, I think that actually gives me a better chance of doing that than business. And it's obviously it could still be a business. So in my head, I was like, I think that might actually be the path I want to go. And it was funny because it was just one of those short, like 5-minute presentations in the beginning of a class. But I was like, that actually sounds pretty cool. And then after doing all the research and, like how can I, switch majors and everything. It was kind of seamless with the business minor. So I still took the same business classes that I wanted to, or for the most part, and then switched to J, and it just worked out. So I was like, I think this was the right decision because I'm a J major, and with like what I learned about being creative and creating, I definitely think that it helped me out. So
Yeah, and in my last year, I did see flyers for the Filipino club, and once I
mhm.
joined, I wasn't there for too long, but I did make some friends there, and our friendship kind of blossomed from there. How long were you in the Filipino club, and what really kind of drew you into there?
Yeah, so it's a funny story actually because so my freshman year, I was like already kind of recruited. I forgot who it was through, but someone was already telling me about KP and the Filipino club, Cultura Filipinas, like
Mhm.
before like my freshman year, and then I couldn't join because at that time I already joined Duck Street Dance Club, so I was already dancing, and the meeting times were the same time as Duck Street practice. So for that reason alone, I didn't actually join KP my freshman and my sophomore year because funny enough, the practices were also the same day for my sophomore year too. So what I did was I only attended the culture night.
Mhm.
So my freshman year, I was there for the culture night, and like that was really cool. And like the whole performance they put on, um, and I was there. I don't think I attended my sophomore year culture night, but it was finally my junior year that Alex Locandazzo, she messaged me, and she was like, "Hey, like like we'd love to have you at KP. We're not doing like a formal meeting. We're going to was it Manila? Was that the restaurant in Eugene or in Springfield? It was the only Filipino restaurant like for miles. But every term they usually like one of the meetings they go there and they just eat and everyone just like hangs out and stuff. So she was like, "Yeah, like we're not doing an actual meeting. Like you can just come to the restaurant with us." And I was like, "That sounds great." Like I didn't haven't even heard of it yet. And that was my junior year, and that was my first time going to a meeting. So it
Mhm.
was really just meeting everyone and like eating Filipino food. And then basically from there, that's how I like got in. The meeting times were different for Duck Street and KP, so I was able to attend. I ended up becoming an intern there, so I was hanging out with um, like the staff, and I kind of helped with like culture night and some of the other events. And then my senior year, I was one half of the PR coordinators, so that was like I was actually like a part of the group and like in the staff and helping plan stuff. So that was it was cool because I felt like I was already like older because I kind of came in late, but just like the way everyone was and like what you mentioned earlier with like there's other Filipinos here. I didn't meet that many my freshman sophomore year. So when I was surrounded by everybody my junior senior year, I was like this is pretty cool. I'm kind of sad that I missed out before, but I definitely made those last 2 years count with KP.
Yeah, my very very first memory with KP was my brother. He went to University of Oregon for I think 2010 through 12, and
Mm-hmm.
he texted me one day. We lived together because I was going to Lane Community College at the time.
Mm-hmm.
He texted me. He's like, "Hey, come to I think next to the library because there's a Filipino event going on." So
Mm-hmm.
I was like, "Okay, sure." We were just like right down the street, so I headed over, and I just remember like walking in and getting handed a plate of spaghetti and hot dogs. So
Nice.
and I
Love it.
remember just walking around like, "Oh, this is a Filipino club. This is cool." So it's definitely again my stint was pretty short. Yours is longer, but it's still like every second there was a lot of fun. Just getting
Mm-hmm.
to know more about the culture and just getting to know more about what our background is was pretty honorable. So
Definitely.
during your time, you also got to be a part of the Oregon men's club basketball as your media
Mm-hmm.
relations manager. Now, I think I've saw some of your photos from your time there. So I mean, that's got to be some great practice for sports shots. Can you kind of tell me about what your role was with the club basketball team, and then how that kind of experience kind of helped you prepare yourself for the real world or prepare yourself for life outside of college?
Yeah. So, um, my sophomore year, I started taking photos for the Oregon Pit Crew for like the student section. So that was my first kind of stint with sports photography in the college setting. So it was from there where I got a little practice in, but after receiving a lot of critiques, I was thinking maybe this might not be for me, especially because through the pit crew I wasn't able to actually get a media pass, so I wasn't actually sitting in like in the actual area you're supposed to be when you're taking photos. Um, but basically from there, one of my good friends, Carell, basically he was saying that, hey, we just started a club basketball team. I know you're taking photos, so if you want to take some photos for the team, we'd love that. And I was like, yeah. I was like, if you guys are so new, you guys should have. I was like, you need an Instagram, you need a Facebook, you need everything, like let's get it going. He was like, yeah, sure. He's like, go ahead. So I made them a Facebook, or maybe I didn't make them the Facebook, but I made them the Instagram. I hopped on the Facebook to kind of help with their social media, and then started taking photos. Like I took their headshots and everything, and then that year it was the national tournament for the region of, I guess, the Northwest or whatever for our league, and then it was basically just that tournament, and then Crow was like, hey, like we're gonna get a crowd out, it's gonna be at the rec center, so you can just bring your camera and and then typically the rec center doesn't allow cameras. But when I walked in, I was like, oh yeah, I was like, I'm the manager for the club basketball team, which I wasn't at the time. But they're like, oh yeah, for sure, go ahead, like it's fine. I was like, oh, perfect. So I was like, that worked. And like I kind of knew it was anyway, because like it was like the tournament, so it was kind of like set up. But that was my first time taking photos for them. That was when I met the coach, Blake. And then from there, Blake was like, you can really do this, like moving forward. I feel like you can, just like stick with the team. And then I was like, is that like a thing? Like, I was like, I don't know. I thought I was just kind of doing it like almost as like a favor for Carell, just to like, get some photos for them. But then the next year, Blake graduated, and then the new coach, Aaron, I met him, and then Carell was still on the team. And basically, like, they asked me, like, hey, like, do you want to take more photos for us? So I took, like, more headshots for them. And then from there, uh, they were going to, like, travel for tournaments. And basically, so, like, I was spending a lot of time with the team and, like, taking photos for their games. But, I wasn't getting paid or anything, especially, I was a student. But basically, they offered me basically they paid for my airfare and my hotel, but I was able to travel with the team for free. So basically, like that was awesome because basically, I'm traveling for free. I'm not getting paid, but like what I'm getting paid in is experience. So my first year, we flew out to UCLA and Ohio State for the national tournament. And just from there, like I was, we were a team. We were traveling. We eventually got matching backpacks. We were a real team. And it wasn't like the D1 team or anything, but like this was the next best thing to me because it was still a team. We had a coach. Like I was the media guy. Like, we were traveling together, team meals and, hanging out with everybody, post game, pre game. Like it was the whole thing. And I felt like I was part of like, like a real team. And like athletically, like I love basketball, but all of them can beat me 10-0 every time. So I was like, this is as close to me playing as I can get. So I was like, getting close with the guys, taking photos, and just being around them, being in the team aspect was everything. And I did that for basically 3 years. And then even when I graduated from U of O, Carell was still there, and he was like, hey, like we're still traveling. If you want to join us, and I was like, I was working at the time, but I was like, you know what? If I can get some time off, I think I can make this work. So I basically traveled with them for free for 3 years. Got all that experience like with the team, new players coming in and out, and yeah, it was really fun. It was really, really cool.
Yeah. So just a couple of questions about that. Who critiqued you on your pit crew photos?
Yeah, so Eric Check, he's a fellow J School photographer. He's an amazing photographer, and when for pit crew, because he was like the lead. I don't know what the titles were called, but he was like the lead photo guy, and me and our group, we would take photos at games and submit them to him, and then he'd kind of take the finals and take and post them, right? But basically, like for even some of the photos, like some of the games, I noticed that some of mine weren't really like getting posted. I'm like, oh, that's fine. Like theirs were great too.
Mm-hmm.
And then we sat down for one of the meetings. He's like, I realized we didn't really like sit down and talk about like what you should be looking for in sports photos. We're just kind of going, taking them, coming back. That was it. So at first there weren't really like actual critiques. So it wasn't until we really sat down that he would bring up examples on the screen and everything, and it didn't mention whose was whose. But I was looking and I was like, pretty much all of those are mine. Like I know that. So I was like, yep. So basically, it was from there that like I got the real critiques, and then of course I talked to him after, and was like, hey, like I know that a lot of those are mine. Like how else can I improve other than what you mentioned? And he was kind of my first like guide to taking like sports photos. And yeah, from there, it was experience, just like shooting more games and everything, and then yeah, just getting more critiques from him and other sports photographers. So they say that in photography, or at least action, there's three things that are the hardest to shoot, which is animals, sports, and babies. And that's because you never know what they're going to do next, which I found out, there's so many times I'm at a basketball game, player will do a pump fake, I'll look up, and then, they're passing it to someone else and I miss the shot. And I'm like,
yeah,
like, you really never know. So,
I mean, that's why you take like close to 300 photos or whatnot, just to make sure that, oh, I missed this, but I do have this.
yep.
This looks good too. I guess in my experiences, but then it's yeah, it is definitely a way of to be a part of something when you can't really be a part of sports or just say news. And that's what I think is great about the field that we're in. It's like if we do want to be a part of something, or we need to improve on a field, like whether it's photography or just telling stories, or be in front of a camera like right now,
Yeah.
just you have so many opportunities to just practice and do it.
Mm-hmm.
People that might say like, oh, you weren't able to get photos for the Ducks men's basketball team, so your club some might see it as like a tier 1 versus tier 2 thing.
Mm-hmm.
What do you say to those people that are like that have that kind of connotation when it comes to club sports, taking photos for club sports versus taking photos for a the official team?
Yeah. Funny enough, a lot of the times when we traveled, like I said, we had matching sweaters at least, or, colors and backpacks and everything. And a lot of people on the plane actually thought we were like the D1 team. And so a lot of people, if you didn't know, you actually like, we were the team, right? And, we're walking around with our O's and, walking around campus. Some people would think that we were like the D1 team. And just like outside of that, even when I do tell people that, I took photos for the club basketball team, they still think, like a lot of those photos are of the D1 team. But just in terms of, like ranking, I guess, of that, I think, at least with sports, it really doesn't matter what level you're at or shooting or working with. I feel like, a team's a team. Sports photo still good sports photo, if it is, and to me, it's more of like the experience, like I mentioned, that was the closest to like a real team that I ever got. So to me, I'd rather travel and do those things with the club team rather than the D1 team, especially because we were like a lot smaller and we were our own, like no one was binding us to anything, so we could essentially do whatever we wanted. And just being like the photographer and like the media guy, like I feel like I could do whatever I wanted. There was no like, oh, I can't say this because we're the official Ducks Twitter or something, So to me, it was more creative and more open to be part of the club team. So I love that experience like even more. And of course, like I would love to shoot for the D1 team, but like the club team was honestly like not, especially now that I've gone through all the traveling and doing all this stuff, I would definitely say that I wouldn't trade that experience for anything.
There you go, man. So you leave University of Oregon with all this experience with the basketball team, and being a coordinator when it comes to the Filipino club, or being in the exec part of that. What kind of jobs did you try for? Did you fail for leaving college? And then can you kind of tell me how you kind of found your way onto Nike's campus, as not as a Nike employee, but as a contractor?
Yeah. So when I first graduated college, because I was still doing the summer classes, like after like the walking part. So
Yep.
it was in that summer when I was trying to decide, what was the next step, and to me that step was going to be here in Portland.
Mm-hmm.
So not too fond of this story, but here it is. So I accepted a job at the Oregon Zoo to be a photographer, which to me, I was like, that's awesome. That's a huge org. That's, like a big opportunity for me to, like show them what I got. So I accepted the job, I went in and everything. And, I was like, hey, like, do I need to bring my camera? Like, like, how would I do this? What do I, like, what are the steps to, get this going? They were like, don't worry, we have cameras, like just, it's your first day, just come in. And I was like, all right. So I come in, blah, blah, blah. We're going through everything. And then, like getting to the camera part, they hand me a camera and there's like a stuffed animal, like ladybug on the lens. And I was like, it's kind of weird, but I was like, okay, I don't know. I guess it's a zoo theme. I was like, sure. And then, they were taking me, into the field. And then basically, instead of being like, taking photos of the lions and, the penguins and doing all the fun stuff, I found out that the job was actually to be the souvenir photographer for people when they're walking in.
Ooh.
Yeah. So let's just say, long story short, I quit the next day because that is not what I signed up for. Like, the details of everything, I was definitely miscommunicated. And, I wasn't aware that that was what it was. So I was like, yep, I'm out. And then basically I called up, I used to work at Finish Line, like the sneaker store, like in the mall. So I called up my old manager in Washington, actually, and I was like, hey, I know there's a Finish Line here in Portland. I was like, can you please, see if they're hiring? Because like I need a job like right now. So I ended up working at Finish Line for 3 months, just, while I was trying to figure out what I was going to do since that didn't work out. And then, yeah, my friend, he talked to me and he was like, hey, like, I have an opportunity for you. It's on Nike's campus if you want to be a part of it. And I was like, let's do it. And yeah, I was a receptionist at Nike, and that was kind of my first step into the door in terms of getting on campus. So
yeah, what did it mean to be on that campus, and also with your history of how you got into sneakers with the Jordan 6 being the one that got this whole thing started?
yeah,
because I've snuck on the campus as a non-employee, and I'm just like, this is where, this is it. This is the Mecca. This is the home court. So how did you feel about that?
yeah. So whether I was, contractor, however it was, like for me to get on campus, I was like, this is it. Like you said, it was the Mecca of like, sneakerheads and the brand, and where it was really born and everything. So I was like, this is amazing. And the coolest part about being like the front desk for Nike was that, at least for what my role was, is I was able to kind of go around to every building. So I was able to see, where different teams were operating on different sides of campus. So being able to like really be, kind of behind the scenes, maybe not working with those teams, but just seeing all the teams and knowing where everybody sits, that was probably like the coolest part, because, you do get to see some of the things that, others don't get to. So it was just cool to be, in the creative space of people that made the products that I love. So from then on, I was like, I need to get on one of these teams, and I'm lucky that I did.
Yeah, time when you're the Oregon Men's Club media relations manager, how much of did you pull from that into that new position you got with Nike?
Yeah. So from that front desk role, I landed a role as a Nike expert on demand, which is just a fancy way of saying social media support guy for Nike. And then from there, I think the biggest thing that I pulled from the club basketball team experience was just my experience with Team Nike, as well as just like basketball performance in general. As an expert on demand, what my role was basically I was answering questions about products, and I had to give information about tech, performance, and all the things about using Nike products, like using them for what they're made for, what for performance. And I love playing basketball casually, but like at a competitive level, I never really did that. But seeing the guys on the club basketball team, and knowing their experiences with like Nike products, like basketball shoes, like I play casually, so it's a little bit of a different experience in terms of like what's actually good on court. So like relating that experience into the workplace without actually playing competitively was really cool, because everyone on that team is so unique, because there's how many Nike products out there in the world, from past to present. There's a million, probably more than that. So I think it was the experience of having like that sort of competitive basketball without being a part of it is like very unique. And every person on that expert on demand team has their own experiences, whether they played in college, or they played in high school, or they played professionally and are retired, or don't play anymore. And every person on that team had their own experience, and our like communication in between us in terms of learning things from each other, that was like the biggest part of the job, in terms of like relaying the same and most accurate information to like customers.
Receptionist positions, it's always been an entryway for more opportunities, and I'm happy to hear that you took advantage of it, and you got it.
Mm-hmm.
But I did stumble on your social medias, and I did see that you got to take some photos for an XFL game. You told me a story about that, and I think it's amazing. Can you
Yeah,
share with me again?
yeah, no, definitely. That's hands down one of the most fun experiences I've ever had. So, um, just like a backstory on like just the XFL. I obviously didn't watch it back in 2001, because I was 6 years old. I didn't even know what football was. But like just like learning about it later on, I was like, that was actually not a terrible idea. Like having another professional football league that's not the NFL for players that might be retired, or that just can't make it on an NFL team, maybe not even make it in the CFL, but still want to play professionally. So I was like, that sounds really cool. And then I think it was either 2018 or it was 2019 when they announced that it was going to be brought back up again. And I was like, you know what, this could be a huge thing, especially because that gives another opportunity for someone like me to go take photos for them. And I think in my head it was still it was established, right, but it was still like a startup business. So I was in my head, I was like, I think if I emailed, because Seattle got a team, so I was like, if I email the media guy for the Seattle Dragons, I was like, I have a feeling that he's going to respond to me. I don't know if he will, but he might take a chance on someone, because I feel like there's no bad publicity with like adding more people taking photos of their game. So opening week arrived. I was already in Seattle, so I was like, I'm gonna just send him an email. And it was like 2 days before the game, so I was like, oh, I don't know if he'll even respond. And he did respond like the same night. But basically, he said, hey, like I would love to have you, come take photos at the game, but you kind of missed the deadline, just because the game's, in a few days. But he said, hey, we have another home game the next week. If you want to, email me again, we can take a look into it. And I was like, that's not a no. So, I saw my opportunity, so that was great. And then, I let him know, hey, I'm going to be at the first game, the opening game. So I went with my friends. So I still enjoyed, and it was cool because I never went to a Seahawks game before. I've never, been in CenturyLink. So just being there for, even though it was a Dragons game, like the environment was still crazy, it was still loud. It was really fun. And then the next week, send him that email. I showed him my resume, my photos, everything. I was like, hey, I would love to take photos. And then pretty much the next day, he was like, hey, I approved you for a pass, blah, blah, blah. I was like, that's awesome. Except I was here in Beaverton, so I was like, I got to get back up there. So literally the next day, I took a Flix bus up to Seattle. And then literally the next morning, I was at CenturyLink like picking up my lanyard. So it was all like really fast because I got approved like 2 days before. But it was fun because I walked in, and obviously all the other photographers there, like they all have probably done this before. They've been there, right? So I knew me walking in, like they're like, all right, who's this guy? But I just acted like I've been there before. I put my gear down and everything, like at the table, and everything, just kind of setting up, and then I was picking up my vest, like to show that I'm a media guy. And then the guy was like, yeah, man, we got water for you this week. Like, sorry we didn't have any last week. Like, we got snacks. Just let us know what you need. And I was like, oh, yeah, thanks. Appreciate it. And then I was just acting like I'd been there the whole time, but it was really my first time. So it was just fun to be in the environment and kind of play the part that, that I never did in college because, like I said, I never got a media pass in college. So that was really the first experience with me, like, picking up a pass, really, being able to sit with, everyone else. And yeah, it was definitely a crazy experience. And when I emailed the media director for the Seattle Dragons, I didn't tell him in the email. I just told him that I take sports photos. But if you really looked at my resume and looked at everything that I sent him, you'll notice one glaring thing, which was there's no football photos in there. And I didn't tell him, like I actually never told him, but like when I got there, that was actually my first football game I've ever taken photos for. So taking sports photos is one thing, and having the experience of, like I said, like just knowing where things are at a certain game. But yeah, I've never shot a football game, like not even like flag football with friends, like not even intramurals or anything like that. So it was like crazy because it was like my first professional sports game, and it was like my first football game. So it was like everything that day was a first. So it was definitely like an experience. Like I had a 70 to 200, but I was like, you need like a 600 for football because everything's so far away. So like I really had to work to like make the photos work. But I think I did a really good job of like capturing things differently than everyone else. I tried to not stand next to other photographers so that I didn't get the same shot as them. And yeah, but it was really, really cool because after the game, I wasn't on assignment. Obviously, I wasn't like hired by anyone. So after the game, a lot of the photographers like already left to go edit in the media room. But I stayed on the field and like I like talked to some players. I took more photos of them interacting with each other and like the fans. I met a few of them, and I said hi to an old friend, Alex Balducci. He went to Oregon.
Yeah,
I was friends with him through, I think it was a business class, but I was friends with him because we were in the same group. But I knew he was playing at that game, so I made sure to try to find him. And I was like, hey, I'm not sure if you remember me, but I was like, I was in your business. He's like, oh yeah, of course I remember you. So it was like cool because like it was like seeing like old friends and just like meeting the players, and like they're all professional players. So it was really cool to just kind of talk with some of them, and seeing some like ex NFL guys and everything. Like Landry Jones was the quarterback of the other team. I was like, that's pretty cool seeing him. I was like that's pretty cool. So you could tell there was like NFL talent like that I was like shooting. So it was really cool. And then went into the media room after. Like I said, everyone's like editing and everything, but everyone had a table, but I didn't have a table because one, I was like new, or I didn't have a space to edit. So what I did was I took all the stackable chairs and I stacked like 6 on top of each other, and then I sat in a chair and I put my laptop down, put in my hard drive, and I was editing like on chairs because there wasn't like room at the table because everyone was in there at that point. So I was just like, I got to get it done, right? Like I got to act like I'm, sending it in, sending in my selects right now. But yeah, it was just really cool since I wasn't on assignment, because typically you send, maybe a package of like 20 or 30 of your best. So that's why a lot of the media people actually like finish really quick. But because I wasn't on assignment and no one was kicking me out, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to edit everything. So I actually had 100 selects, which is insane. So I was like, you know what? I just sat there. I think it took me 2 hours. I went through all my selects, edited all of them, and I just like, I sat there. I was the last media person to leave the room because I was like, I was there like 2 hours after the game ended. So I was basically there at the stadium for like a little less than like 12 hours because I was there, from the morning till like nighttime.
Hmm.
So yeah, I was sitting there, edited everything, and I was like, damn, that was a long, long day. Like it was crazy, but it was super cool because I posted on Instagram right after, and I the next day I took all the photos and I like paired them up with like each player, and then I actually sent them off to each player, like through Instagram, and like I want to say like at least maybe like 10 to 15 of them like actually reposted my photo, they tagged me. A lot of them like hit me back, and like I talked to a lot of them. I'd say that I'm friends with at least like 5 of them, so it was really cool because I was able to interact with them. I was like, hey, like I'm just a freelance guy, so if you can talk to your guys at the Dragons, if y'all need some more photographers, if you like my work, definitely put in a word for me. So it was really cool because I was actually able to interact with a lot of the players. So now with everything that's going on, for me it's definitely sad to see the XFL currently bankrupt, just because of they can't put on any games, and they had to cancel their season. But it's that experience was really cool, and I'm definitely rooting for XFL to make a comeback from all this.
Yeah, man, that's an amazing story. Be able to, stack the chairs and use that as your
It was
table.
crazy. I literally was editing on like 6 chairs stacked up as a table. So
I am picturing that, and that's the epitome of freelance journalism.
yeah,
You gotta do
definitely.
what you gotta do.
Yeah, especially with like the rookie in the room. I think everyone knew that. They were like, damn, this guy is obviously dedicated. But yeah, like, they all had their designated spots on the tables. And I was like, I'm just the kid in the corner with, my laptop on some chairs. So,
So, let's say shooting pee wee football is probably a good learning speed because it's a little bit slower, and then you work your way up to like I wouldn't say like jump to high school. I think just the early years of football. In your career,
mhm,
you want to build up to NFL pro speed. What was your
definitely.
strategy when you went into that? Because outside of technical technology limitations, and in you being in other spots, how else did you take those photos? I don't know. What was your mindset?
Yeah. So especially with it being, my first ever football game, first ever pro game, because everything else, I shot was either high schools, kids, or like college sports. So it was college sports in Oregon is definitely a little bit of a step up in terms of production and professionalism. But like I said, I never got a media pass for them. So the biggest thing that I took from uh, from all those experiences to bring that into my experience in that game, that XFL game, was basically like just to remain professional. I think even though I said that I was like acting like I've been there before, I think that was really like part of the experience. Just like when I was on the field, I tried not to get in anyone's way because football sidelines are crazy. I'm passing players, coaches, other media staff, and the whole production was there. So just like trying to remain professional, not get in anyone's way, and like kind of act like I knew what I was doing. Since I've never shot a football game before, I don't know where to stand. I don't know, what the next play is going to be. But just using, just like kind of my intuition of like, I feel like this might be the spot. And, uh, knowing the sport, of course, can really help because, it's third and long. They're not going to run it there, or they're not going to throw it. They're going to run it. So you can see, like with the time remaining, like they're going to do this, they're going to do that. So doing that really helped me because I'm really paying attention to the clock and who's up right now, like what are they going to go for. So just like all these different things was I was like, let me just be professional, let me see where I need to be. And I got one of my favorite shots, because I knew it was going to be a pass. Got the touchdown pass, the guy catching it, and it was a whole experience with just like being professional, trying to I know where the next play is going to be, or I can predict at least. And it's not being next to photographers that are doing the same thing, but just like seeing where they're going to be too, because I know that they're more seasoned than I am, and just taking every opportunity to do whatever I can. My first couple shots was the team running out of the tunnel, and there were some photographers that were on the field, like taking some photos, and then me and a couple others were on the sideline. And then one of them asked me, hey, like, are we able to go on the field for like, the tunnel run? And I was like, you know what, until someone says no, I'm just gonna go do it. So I just went, and then they followed me. And I was like, yeah, like, I mean, we're obviously media, so I wasn't afraid of getting kicked out, but I was like, maybe they'll tell us to move or something. But I was like, you know what, I'm just gonna go, because like at that point, I didn't even know the tunnel run was about to happen, because I don't know what's going on. So I was like, you know what, let's just go. So I went, got some amazing shots from that. So it was just being as like, around everyone and professional as possible.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. So your next, or actually, one more follow-up. Were you able to make any connections? Because you talked about making connections with players because you sent out their photos to them, and you also talked with them after the game. As far as other photographers, were you able to collaborate with anyone or get anyone's like make connections with that kind of field, since this is something that you have an eye for?
Yeah, the girl that asked me to if we could go onto the field, who she was working under, I made a connection with them, like because they're kind of like a 2-woman team, so I made a connection with them to try to shoot some other games. But with everything that's going on right now, that's on hold. So hopefully I can exercise that connection a little bit later when there's some more opportunities. But my favorite story in terms of connecting with a photographer is Rod Marr. He's like he's the guy behind all of the iconic Seahawks photos like you've ever seen.
Mm-hmm.
He's been their photographer since like day one. And I messaged him maybe a week or like right before I arrived to that game. And I was like, hey Rod, I'm a huge fan of your work. I'm shooting my first XFL game in like tomorrow or whatever it was. I'd love some advice. I've never been to CenturyLink. If you can, help me out in any way, that'd be great. I saw his story and he was out of town. So I was like, oh, I'm not going to meet him there. So a message is probably the best. And then I'm at the game. And then, like just with like journalism, you're trying to set the scene. So I'm taking wide shots of the arena and, the close-ups of their cleats and all this other stuff. So one of the photos I was taking was like of a helmet on the ground, and it was like kind of artsy, right? But it was definitely like not really a needed shot. But I was like leaning over in a weird angle taking the photo, and I was like, chimping is when you look at your camera screen right after, like it's better to just kind of shoot and trust that you know what you're doing. But I was, chimping at like a helmet on the ground, not a sports shot. So it was like, what is this guy doing? So then, I was doing that, and then I kind of look up, and then there was a guy like kind of laughing, not in like a mean way, but just like, like what's this guy doing?
Yeah.
And I look up, and I didn't recognize him at first, but now he was like having fun. I was like, oh yeah, this is great, but I'm just taking a photo of a helmet. And then he goes, hi, my name's Rod. And then like it hit me. I was like, oh my gosh, like I didn't even recognize him, but like this is Rod Marr. I was like, oh my gosh, like it's so nice to meet you. I was like, I actually messaged you like yesterday, about this game. And I said, I didn't think you were going to be here. He's like, oh yeah, I saw your message, but I was so busy. I was on that flight back actually, because he posted he was in LA, but he was like, oh, I was on the flight back, so I just didn't respond. But like now I'm here. He's like, do you want to ask me here? I was like, I'd love to. So like we talked for a little bit. It was really, really cool to just like kind of pick his brain a little bit and, shoot with him. He was shooting the game too. I didn't talk to him after because he kind of made his edits and left right away. But I messaged him again after, showing him like what I did. And he was like, hey man, this is great work. Just like, keep grinding, keep, like making these connections, keep trying to come back. And, like your work is good. It's like we can use this. So he's like, just make sure you keep like showing up, and, we'll see what we can do. And I was like, that's amazing. So, it was cool, because like I kind of made that connection with at least a sports photographer that, like I look up to. So that was really cool. So I really hope that once all this is done, I think, I can definitely use him as a resource to learn some more.
There you go, man. I'm so happy for you. There you go.
Really
That's
cool.
Awesome.
It was just funny the way I met him, because I was taking a picture of a helmet and the game was going on. But it was fun.
Life's funny that way. You reach out, you throw something out there, and hope to some big fish, and then, if it doesn't happen, it happens. But it happened for you. It actually was able to follow through, and look at that. You made a connection with a professional, sports photographer for the Seattle Seahawks. I mean, that's
Yeah,
for us. That's in the freelancing game. You're like, oh man,
yeah,
that's a win.
yeah. It was super awesome. He was super nice. He replied to all my messages after. So I'm like, that was really cool. Now I'm able to say that I shot with Ron Mar.
Aha, there you go.
Yeah.
So, in the beginning of the interview, we talked about your fluid roots.
Hmm.
You're wearing the shirt.
Yep.
I'm gonna make an assumption that you're also wearing the hat. If
Oh,
not, I
had to.
apologize.
Yeah.
There you go. That's what I thought. So, can you kind of tell me about fluid roots? What's your guys's, I guess, mission statement, and what are you trying to do with the brand?
Yeah. So Fluid Roots actually started with Davin. Davin is the he's the other co-founder of Fluid Roots. Davin actually is kind of like the heart of Fluid Roots because he actually had this idea way back in college. I met Davin through Duck Street Dance Club. So we're both hip hop dancers, and just from there, he like always talked about this thing, Fluid Roots, Fluid Roots. And at the time, I was like, oh, I don't, it sounds like clothing brand, sounds like something he'd love to get into and everything. So I didn't really know much about it. He made some shirts, um, and we like all our whole friend group, like the dancers, we all got them. So we were all wearing these Fluid Root shirts, and at first I really didn't know what it was, and then he kind of explained. So I guess it might be backwards on the screen, but fluid actually stands for something. So fluid stands for forever learning until I die. And in terms of dance, since that was kind of where it stemmed from him, is that like even if you're the best dancer in the world, right, you can always get better. So I think, especially with us being at the level that we were at in college, um, and like my experience of just dancing in high school going into college, I was definitely always learning. I wasn't the best, so just learning through each other, and like from everything that was around us, that was how fluid, in terms of fluid roots, really started, for him at least. And then roots is like always relating back to wherever you came from. So Davin is from Hawaii, and then I'm from Washington, right? And then our ethnic background is we're both Filipino. So just like always making sure that no matter where you are, what you're doing, you always remember like the hard times, or wherever you came from, because that can be motivation for you moving forward. And then forever learning until I die is always you can relate that not just to dance, but you can relate that to anything in your life. So whether it's creating content, taking photos, um, basketball, just because I mentioned that earlier, you can always learn more. There's always a way to get better. And putting those two things together, it was Fluid Roots. And then it was actually first in 2018 when I brought the idea up to David, and I was like, I feel like you can make Fluid Roots into like a real thing. I was like, I feel like it's kind of just like within us, or like our friend group, like with the dancers and everything. But I was like, I really feel like Fluid Roots can be like a thing, like either like a brand, a clothing brand, something. I was like, I feel like there's more to this than you printing off a couple shirts for us. So he was like, okay, okay. And then we started talking about it, and then basically from there we were like starting to order samples. And I was like, what, I feel like we can do this. Like we had shirts and everything, blah blah. And then come November 1st, 2019, we launched the brand. And we put together a website. We put together all the designs and everything. And it's cool because I feel like now we have something that like it's real, like we can wear it, it's a thing, it's a brand, it's a vision, it's everything. So it came to life. And it was just cool to see that from his idea from, I don't know what year that was, like 2015 or something, like just a fun thing that he was just printing off for friends and telling us about. But now it's like we're in 2020, and I'm wearing a hat, a shirt, like we have stuff on a website that we can sell. It's like me telling the story of Fluid Roots, how it started and everything. Like it's cool because now it's like out in the world. So yeah, that's the story of Fluid Roots' birth, I guess.
Awesome, man. And what I did see you guys' Instagram, and I did see you have some shirts coming out. Do you have anything coming down the pipeline that you can share with everyone?
Yeah, so we definitely have some big projects coming. Can't be too specific, but just know that we got some big stuff coming. It's cool because like I said, we launched back in November. We're in April now, so that's a little over 6 months. And it's cool because I think especially in terms of running a business and running a clothing brand and everything, especially with like the times that we're in and how different things are right now. We're definitely learning. We're forever learning on how to run a brand and uh, you know, run like a business. So I think it's cool because I have like firsthand opportunity at being in the head of something like Fluid Roots. So it's cool because like the creativity of like what goes on the Instagram and how we market our stuff. What audience do you want to reach out to? It's cool because like we're kind of still learning too, but it's been a pretty solid 6 months. And yeah, like I said, we got some big projects coming, so don't want to give away too much, but just know that there are big things coming. Summer's coming up. Yeah, there's going to be a lot of cool stuff coming for Fluid Roots very very soon.
That's so awesome. I'll shout out your stuff from the rooftops, and I'll do what I can to help spread the word of Fluid Roots.
Appreciate that.
Thank you so much for sticking around to the end of the video. Do you have any follow-up questions for the guest? Put them in the comments below, and I will work to get those answers for you. For more content from KC Media, please hit the subscribe button, and I'll see you guys next time.